We have the pleasure of having Gary Danielson of CBS right here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing good. I felt like I was back in the days when I played against Buddy Ryan's Chicago Bears when we were lucky to get 3 points in the game.
Yeah,
the Lions.
I mean, so what do we take out of this about Alabama for those that are already looking down the road at a college football playoff, Gary?
Rich, absolutely no surprise. If you're going to play Alabama, and I know a lot of people get enamored with the formula to beat Alabama, and I've been covering them now through Nick's whole reign here from when he rebuilt the team in 2008 all the way till this season. It's the same formula all the time. Number one, this is like a mini NFL football team. You better be able to at least match their physical play on the offensive and defensive line. And then after that, I don't care who else. If you can't do that, it doesn't matter who else you have. You can have the best quarterback, the best running back, the tallest receivers. If you can't do it, you're going to get slaughtered against them. Now, if you can stay even, like Clemson did in that game, like LSU has when they beat them, like Ohio State did when they beat them in that football game, now everything else comes into play if you have efficient quarterback play. Now, that efficiency might be running and passing, really good passing, really good quarterback runner, but you must bring the quarterback position, and that's really been the story for LSU. They match them pretty well, 21 versus 22. But that last player has always really fallen to the Alabama side. They've had the better quarterback.
Yeah, and then Jalen Hurts, at one point, I retweeted this during your broadcast from Bruce Feldman, who writes for Fox Sports and broadcast for him, that Hurts accounted for 219 of Alabama's first 317 yards.
Yeah, but so, I mean, that's like saying, he's their offense. I mean, the way LSU was defending Alabama was they weren't defending Jalen Hurts as a quarterback who could run. They were defending him as Leonard Fournette who could throw. He is their offense now. This is a new version of their football team. So there was a blueprint, I thought, that Dave Aranda, the outstanding young defensive coordinator, he's kind of worked his way up the ranks. He was out in Utah State and Hawaii, and then he got the job at Wisconsin, and he jumped over to LSU. He had a really brilliant game plan against them. Everybody likes to bounce the ball outside like the NFL terminology is and the defense that Alabama uses. He did the opposite. He pinched them in. Every time there was a play-action fake, they took the quarterback. They tried to force Alabama to run the ball inside. It was an interesting game plan. The only frustrating part, the first 11 plays Alabama ran, their longest gain, they only had one gain over 3 yards. In the first quarter, LSU only had one play, and that was kind of a jump ball pass. Verne asked me at the end of the first quarter, who won the first quarter, and I said the NFL scouts.
That's a great answer, Gary. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
There were a lot of NFL talent. Now, I don't think as much, Rich, as the 2011, but pretty close, pretty close.
Gary Danielson joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So is it basically up to Auburn to keep Alabama down here, or
sure.
What do you think?
So. They have that unique style it's almost of a shotgun wishbone offense. We just saw what Navy did to Notre Dame. Now it's much harder to do it to Alabama. And Sean White gives them, their young quarterback, when healthy, gives them just enough passing on the outside that Alabama has to play honest with their corners and safeties to keep that big play-action pass. And actually their defense, is a top 5 defense in the SEC, which is, a good defense. But this is a pretty unique. I thought, actually, if they could get by LSU, I think their next challenge is in the semifinal of the playoffs. It's going to take Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan, Louisville, Washington to beat these teams better than the other teams in the SEC.
Gary Danielson joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Did Lamar Jackson, with Fournette's performance, and even though obviously Jabril Peppers is doing the both sides of the football thing, do you think Lamar Jackson wrapped up the Heisman with 7 total touchdowns this weekend?
Probably. I mean, it's not something I take a lot of time to worry about. Last year at this time, Derrick Henry just entered the talking point. He gained 200 yards in the game, and Fournette had 31. It's a great, unique part of college football. But I try to keep out of that as much as I can. I try to really concentrate on, what's making these games go, and that the Heisman usually sorts itself out, right in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, then, at the risk of getting outside of what you're saying is the scope of your focus, Dak Prescott at the next level
really
is
interesting.
really balling out, Gary. What did you see from him at your level that translates to some reason why we shouldn't be so surprised with what he's doing?
Rich, it's really an interesting question because all of the scouts and all the people I talk with, my NFL friends, talk about how the pro game and the college game is diverging as much as all the way back to when the colleges were running the wishbones in the 70s, where the college game was not producing the skilled NFL players or maybe better trained NFL players in those days. But we're back to that now with the spread options that all of these teams are running. Now, the NFL's moving a little bit that way, but the position that you would think would have the most trouble moving to the NFL would be quarterback, but that has not been the case. Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Marcus Mariota, Dak Prescott, Colin Kaepernick, in various degrees, have all had some success early. It appears like the offensive linemen and the running backs maybe are struggling to bridge it a little bit more. But I always thought that the biggest risk would be drafting these quarterbacks from spread offenses. But the way Dak has gone, and I think the interesting thing about Rich about Dak was at Mississippi State, he was everything there for 3 years. He did every interview. Every game he played was televised. He did interviews, might not been with you guys or, Al Michaels, but it was ESPN or CBS in there every week. And he had every question asked him, and I think he transitioned very nicely, obviously, got with a good football team. But these guys coming in now to the big leagues are not phased at all. And then with the media part of it.
And then you've got still some spots, as we know, for pocket passers.
Yep.
And Gary, there's a guy who's filling in, following in your footsteps as a quarterback in Detroit for the Lions. A guy you also saw many Saturdays in your current position with Matthew Stafford.
Right.
What do you think of what he's been able to do for the Lions? He's having his best year with Calvin Johnson retired.
Yeah.
Gary.
He really was an amazing player when he played, at Georgia when he came in. I interviewed him 3, 4, 5 times. And one of the questions I always like to ask, fellow quarterbacks, I said, Matt, and I kind of knew what the answer would be, but I said, Matt, when you hit your drive into the trees in the woods, do you ever chip out? He goes, never. He goes, I always find an opening to try it and go through. It might hit off 3 tree limbs, but I always try to go through, and that's how he plays. And I always felt he was a clutch player, and that's been proven. Rich, no disrespect to the Lions because, I wasn't good enough to take them to the playoffs. He has once. But I don't know if there's a more clutch football player, and I don't know if the Lions have 2 wins on the board without Matthew Stafford.
He's been incredible, Gary. There's no doubt about that. And I'd be remiss before I let you go in the year where Dick Enberg has hung him up, and
right.
And obviously Vince Scully. You're sitting next to a legend yourself who is not going away completely, but stepping out of the SEC booth for CBS. What's it like? Been riding shotgun with Verne Lundquist all these years and this year in particular?
First, it's so richly deserved. For many years, Verne was never the guy, and he, I don't know, he never really said it publicly, but you wonder if he ever, deep in his heart, figured why didn't I get to be that lead guy somewhere? He was supposedly demoted to the SEC college football. It turned out to be a blessing, not just for him. But I don't know if it was exactly intelligent design. But as the SEC grew from a regional footprint to a national, brand, I don't know if they couldn't do it without the integrity and the honesty and the comfortable voice of the lead analyst every weekend. I've worked with, I think, 3 Hall of Famers. Brad Nessler for 5 or 6 years at ESPN and ABC, and back. In fact, Brad will be returning to be my partner next year. and then Brent for 7 years,
Brent.
and now Verne. I've been a pretty lucky guy.
Gary, thanks for the time. Really enjoyed listening to you with Verne and having you on here. I'd love to have you back down the road.
You got it. Thanks, Rich.
You got it. That's Gary Danielson of CBS.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.